Good morning. Morning. All right, there we go. As many of you probably know, UGA has a 2020 strategic plan, and that plan calls for a 20% reduction in greenhouse gases by the year 2020. The problem is that when that plan was written, we had no idea what our greenhouse gas footprint was. So, over the last few years, the Office of Sustainability and the Climate Action Planning Committee have been crunching the numbers, and I am pleased to report for the first time the results of that work to you this morning. So, starting from a baseline of fiscal year 2010, we have a net statewide emissions number of 270,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. So that gives us the 2020 target number of 216,000. Does anyone, for a sustainable UGA packable tote bag, want to guess how we're doing so far as of last year? Go for it, just shout it out.
12%.
Nope.
7%.
Who said 8? All right, so we're at 8%, which is actually right on track for that amount of time. And that's also kind of remarkable because we've actually added 13% to our overall square footage and facilities during that time as well. So this is the breakdown of statewide gross emissions for fiscal year 2014. And when I say statewide, we tried as hard as we could to get data from every state facility that UGA is responsible for. We weren't able to get everything, but it's worth noting that we do have energy use for not only the Athens campus, but also Griffin, Tifton, and Skidaway. And it's also interesting to note that for the purchased electricity, which is the largest component, obviously, the electricity usage by the main campus here in Athens is 99% of that. So this is just the top 5. We'll zoom in a little bit to get the bottom 6. You may look at the solid waste number and wonder why it's so low. I'll get to that in a minute. What I think is really interesting is that a few years ago there was concern that the agricultural components of our operations would be a detriment when we were comparing UGA to other universities from a greenhouse gas footprint standpoint. Even though we accounted for every cow, chicken, and pig and pound of fertilizer that we use statewide, we're at less than 1% for agricultural activities compared to all this other stuff. Faculty and staff air travel, I'll get to that in a second as well. So what's missing? We weren't able to get every single piece of statewide information, but like I said, we were pretty thorough. So most of these things are minor concerns as far as getting a complete envelope. The one thing that does concern me though is reimbursed air travel. So show of hands, who flies for work? All right, keep your hands up if you purchase your airline tickets yourself and then get reimbursed by the university. Okay, that's a problem for me because we were only able to get data through the UGA travel agency. So actually not through them, but from finance and administration, they only track specifically airline travel that is through the travel agency. All the other stuff is kind of jumbled all together, so we can't separate airline travel from hotels and car rentals and things like that. So that tells us that we do need to probably go back and revisit that and maybe retroactively revise the numbers later on. Sinks and offsets. So as I said, we had gross emissions, we have net emissions. Dan Markowitz from Forestry did a really nice study looking at all the UGA forest lands and calculated the carbon sequestration capacity of those 25,000 acres of forest. And that knocks a whopping 21% off of our gross emissions annually. And finally, in 2013, Athens-Clarke County started generating electricity from captured landfill gas at the landfill here. And because we now are not responsible for methane emissions, and it's kind of an oversimplification, but at that time, any garbage put into that landfill from there to the future is now putting methane into a generator rather than into the atmosphere. We get a 4% bonus, not just because of the methane emissions, which is most of that, but also because we're generating electricity and offsetting conventional generation means. So think of some good questions, and I'll talk to you in a few minutes.